now, our buddy Sam Fortier of the Washington Post. And Sam, we welcome you in with a message from Noah Eagle.
Just
Anthony,
tell him I'm going to go old school Nick Coletti. Just say saw, dude, and see what happens. And then maybe also say that I believe WAER got the better of the Daily Orange this year.
Yeah, that's what I was going
Cup.
for.
So maybe just double down on that.
welcome to the show, Sam.
I'm impressed by your commitment to the Syracuse bit to just interview people that went there, though in the media you'll have your pick. And I will say it doesn't really matter to me who won Media Cup this year because I know that my senior year, the Daily Orange beat WAER. So that's all that matters to me, man.
That is, I mean, same, but in reverse. Like my senior year, WAER won. So it's really who gets the last laugh. And when we all graduate, it seems like we all got the last laugh. Also, we had to balance it out. Your colleague at the Post, Ava Wallace, is absolutely wonderful, but she did go to Georgetown, so we had to have multiple Syracuse people on today to balance it out.
You're having Ava on later, or you're having her on?
No, we had Ava on at 5.
Okay, all right.
Yeah.
Well, I'm gonna. It's tough to follow that, but that's okay.
Well, she had to follow David Aldridge, so she.
Okay.
Anthony, literally every guest today, outside of Noah, has complained about who they've had to follow. What are we doing? Is this our fault? Are we booking the wrong people? Are we doing it in the wrong order? Sam, are you okay?
I'm okay.
I'm good. I'll say I put Ant in this position because I was actually out at a couple meetings in Baltimore, and I'm actually in the taxi home now. So that I put Ant in a bad spot. I'll own that.
Okay, all right. We appreciate your ownership of your specific situation. Let's talk about football, shall we? And also safe travels back in your traffic there on the way back from Baltimore. All right, so obviously the overriding story for this first week of OTAs is Chase Young's absence, secondarily Montez Sweat and Charles Leno's absence. I'll just leave this open-ended, no preamble, no setup. What did you make of it?
No preamble, no setup. That's a Craig Hoffman rarity.
You ain't kidding. These 3 hours don't fill themselves, Sam.
Right. I will say, look, Chase Young, I know, is the number one story. Fifth-year option declined, concerns about his maturity before. Is he going to come in? Is he going to play well? I think all those things are super legit. I would be concerned, too. I do think Ron Rivera has some credence to say he's not as worried as he was in 2021 because Chase is older. He's been around the system. But anytime you haven't played football in a long time with your injury, I know you played a little bit coming back for the year, every rep is valuable. So for him not to be there, I think he's costing himself. I think he could cost the team. But at the same time, I do want to say this caveat, it sounds, it sounds redundant. It sounds basic. But, if he comes back and balls out, if whatever program that he's doing right now works and he comes back and he's, the Chase Young they thought they were getting when they drafted him number 2 overall, that he looked like his rookie year, then every sin is absolved. Everybody's fine. There's no complaining at all. So it really does come down to how he's playing on the field. The Charles Leno one, I actually think is almost low-key as big a deal as Chase Young just because you have a new quarterback, you have a new offensive coordinator. I know that he was in a similar system under Matt Nagy in Chicago, but, I think it's a big deal still.
No, I agree with that. And, if he knows the system, cool. You're a leader on the team. Can you come help your left guard who definitely doesn't? No matter who it is, Sadiq Charles or Chris Paul, they have barely played NFL football. As for Chase's side of it, though, I think you hit on something that I've said as well, which is, if he goes out and balls out, then, okay, he wins. How would you say this decision is affecting his ability to do that, though? Do you think it's possible he can get just as good of work in for what he needs at this stage of his career individually versus coming to the team? And then also, some people like to point out the injury risk. Is there any elevated injury risk coming into a team setting versus working out on his own?
I would point out that if the Commanders have 90 players on the roster, 87 of them are there. 86 of them are participating. Cam Curl obviously is not doing the teamwork in terms of, is there any argument for there's elevated injury risk, so he shouldn't go. But I will say, every player is different, and if that's the way that he views it, if that's the reason he's not here, he's totally entitled to that opinion. It's voluntary, then he should do that. I do think, at least for me, at least on the outside, not having heard from Chase himself, it's just tough, right? Because, Charles Leno is going into year 10. He's played for a really long time. He knows exactly what his body needs. He's not coming off a major injury, although, he could have been playing through injury at the end of last year, but he's not. He's not coming off the major, career resetting ACL tear that Chase was, and obviously his ACL was complicated. So for Charles Leno to say, hey, I'll see you guys in a couple weeks, I'm going to take care of myself, I think you have to have a higher degree of confidence in him than with Chase, just because he's younger, he's played fewer snaps, and he has that big injury involved. So, again, it's his prerogative, it's his career. I will never tell him, hey, this is not the right thing for you because it's not my body, it's not my money. But at the same time, I think it's totally reasonable to question whether that's the right approach.
Yeah. Sam Fortier, of course, Washington Post Commanders beat reporter with us here on the Team 980. One thing that I did find interesting from the reports out there and talking to Logan, who was obviously out there for the podcast the other day, is that the structure of practice also made it seem like less big of a deal to me, and I'm very curious to see if Chase comes to some of the other voluntary portions. What did you notice about the practice structure, as it relates to a decision for a lineman to come or not come, considering they didn't do a whole lot of teamwork, but also just more generally the influence that Eric Bieniemy very apparently has?
Yeah, it's one practice, but just even talking to guys, it does seem like, OTAs is lighter this year. I mean, last year, if I remember correctly, Scott Turner was running power. He was running duo, without pads in May. And that's something that you really got to contend with. Whereas now it does seem a little lighter, and they're going to, at least, in the first couple of days, and they're going to install, each period, each concept multiple times through these next 3 weeks. So Chase does have an opportunity to come in and learn the system. And obviously, he's been in the system before, but hey, what tweaks are we going to make? How are we going to play certain things, especially with Chase being healthy early this year? How does that change how Jack Del Rio wants to approach it? I don't know. But, I mean, there's a potential there for it to not be as big a deal as maybe it could have been.
Yeah, it seems like they're just doing a lot more pass stuff, and they'll obviously eventually install a run game. Duh. But it does seem like in this stage of it, it's very, very perimeter oriented. What did you notice in how things were being coached with Bieniemy out there versus what you've seen in the past with Turner or different position coaches in place?
I'm sorry, man. You cut out. I couldn't hear you.
All good. Ask what with this perimeter-oriented stuff, especially that we saw a lot of screen work, a lot of, passing patterns over the past couple of days, what kind of details and what kind of coaching style did you see or coaching difference did you see with Bieniemy compared to years past?
I think that something that players were frustrated with at the end of last year, right, was – and Ryan Fitzpatrick said this on Thursday Night Football on the Amazon show, he felt that Scott Turner's scheme was a plug-and-play scheme, hey – this thing works. You guys just need to, just execute it. And I think that Eric Bieniemy, while he does have a West Coast-based offense, he does seem a little bit more committed to retrofitting it to his players' strengths. He doesn't have a Travis Kelce here, so certainly, or a Patrick Mahomes, obviously. But I think that he's going to figure out, okay, what does Sam Howell do super well? He hasn't had a ton of experience under center, but what can we do? What concepts can we work with him? Where is his footwork at? Or do we need to be in the gun a lot more? I think he's going to figure out how is Antonio Gibson best used? Obviously, we drafted Chris Rodriguez, another downhill runner. Can we use AG in space a little bit more? Can we use him even lined up as a wide receiver a little bit more? He is going to figure out those things, and he is going to fit his philosophy to the system. That's been a really big talking point of his early. So I think that you've got to be optimistic that he's going to figure that out.
That was something Logan said that I found pretty fascinating. Is he said there was a ton of different position groups and the way that they would use different alignments and stuff. And it's day one. What are they going to do when they get to the more complex game plan stuff in the fall? That's pretty wild to see that stuff so early in a training camp.
Yeah, and I think a bunch of different formations, a bunch of different looks. I will say that when Scott Turner was here, the personnel groupings that they called out for practice, it was just 11, 11, 11, 12, whatever. And Eric Bieniemy has uses animals. And so I will say, it was very funny to me to hear zebra, 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 or tiger or rhino or whatever it was. I shouldn't say which one is which, but that switch was really interesting to me.
Yeah, no, that's a throwback to me because that's what Gruden used. Was there a lot of like Zebra was?
Oh, incredible!
Yeah, I'm pretty sure Zebra was just 11 because like they called that Z slot receiver their Zebra, and so like that stuff's pretty well known in NFL circles. Some of them, obviously, some of them get changed. Nomenclature was like my like hobby horse when I was on the beat of figuring out all that stuff and getting different play names and stuff because I found it really fascinating. My favorite one was they had a personnel grouping where Jordan Reed would line up at receiver, and it was called Hulk. So if he was lining up split out wide right, it'd be like Hulk right, and I'm like, I want to be Hulk. That's the coolest thing I've ever heard.
Yeah, I absolutely. This is going to be like one of my favorite, like things to figure out as we go through camp and obviously the rest of OTAs. But I would love for them to have a Hulk package. I think that would be a lot of fun. And I know that at Alabama when they used Deron Payne as a tight end, I can't remember if he caught that touchdown pass or not, but they targeted him on.
Yeah.
But if they brought that back in terms of, I think it was called Rhino, that would be a fun one.
Yeah, that would be good. I think we should do an entire show, Sam, sometime in July where we just come up with different personnel packages and name them ourselves. Things get really, really bleak in July, and that sounds fun to me.
Yeah, I would absolutely be in, and let's get that done.
Excellent. All right, put that down for sometime around July 13th. All right, Sam Fortier is with us to talk actual football here on the Team 980. Speaking of the quarterbacks, how did Brissett and Howell look in your first view of them this offseason?
Yeah, I mean, we probably saw, 40 passes, something like that. I mean, I think they looked pretty good, but I'm always hesitant to, read too much into that. Jacoby Brissett had a nice, back foot throw that I remember. But Sam Howell, he looked solid. He looked, pretty crisp on time. The thing that stood out to me most is he really, is accurate on the run. And I think that, that is something that stood out in the Dallas game. It's something that stood out in his college tape. He, and especially maybe even because of Carson Wentz last year, there were times where he would just airmail passes, and Taylor Heineke, the arm strength was obviously a legit concern, even though he had all of the other stuff. But I think that Sam Howell, he certainly has a lot to like, and I think that showed up, at least in the early goings.
Yeah, reports, everything I saw was good, and it seems like there's a maturity and a growth with him, growth in terms of the footwork and some of the mechanic stuff. But I even think after that Dallas game last year, we also saw the locker room speech that you see the maturity and the leadership skills that he's got. Can you tell in these practices, the way they're structured now? Because, again, they're not doing a ton of team, but there is a lot of 7-on-7 and some of those similar scenarios, how he commands the huddle, how he leads, and kind of what control he has over the practice field as a quarterback?
I wish we were close enough to hear him, spit out the verbiage and get the play calls in, particularly with a new language, something that I think everybody's adjusting to. We're not close enough to hear that. But I will say the command of the huddle, and I don't know if it's the marketing department being like, hey, make sure we use the word command a lot. But to a man, every single player that we talked to yesterday on offense, AG, Logan Thomas, Terry McLaurin, command of the huddle was the phrase that they used to talk about how he's growing. Terry said, you can tell that EB, has really put this on him. He's the number one guy. He's the starter. They want him to take ownership of this offense. And so I think the best example of that was yesterday. There was a play where I want to say someone lined up wrong or the splits were wrong, and Sam Howell actually called everybody back into the huddle before getting the snap off. And that's something that EB has talked about, really wanting guys to do. And there was a play where they didn't get out of the huddle fast enough yesterday, and EB was like, you guys got to do this stuff. Didn't say stuff faster. We only have so much. We only have X amount of time to get this right. So get it together. And I thought that, Sam responded pretty well to that. And I will say EB did get on Sam at one point because they were in red zone and maybe on the 10-yard line. And Sam tried to get a tight window throw through, and Percy Butler picked him off. And he didn't chase down Percy Butler. And EB got right on him and said, you threw it, you go get it, which I thought was a nice little touch.
Yeah, very different than a lot of coaches who are like, you threw it, now crawl up in the fetal position and don't get hurt.
Exactly.
So that's interesting. I think it speaks to EB's competitiveness. Sam, I promise you I'm not asking this question in a cynical manner, which I know is a great setup. But I promise you I'm not asking this in a cynical manner. But Rivera has made it a point to give a lot of responsibility to EB. Obviously, he's been hands off running the defense. He talked about how he's been sitting in some meetings here and there. But like, what's the thing that Rivera's doing that has the biggest impact on this team right now? Because some head coaches are very hands on their side of the balls. Gruden was like that when he was here. Obviously, Sean's like that in LA. O'Connell's like that in Minnesota. Ron's been more of this CEO type, but does he even give some of the responsibility that he's had to Bieniemy as the assistant head coach? What's the biggest impact Rivera is having on this team right now?
That's a great question. And I don't have a clear answer for you. I would probably say like vibe setting, being the CEO, being the guy that makes sure that everybody is communicating well. But like when you look at the things, when you hear Ron talk about how much responsibility he has delegated to EB, I mean, it's a lot. I mean, he said that they've changed he's not changed not only the structure of practice, but like the scheduling itself, when they're practicing. He's changed, how media works. I mean, it's really a top-down approach. And he's, Ron said EB has been communicating with Jack. He's been communicating with Nate Katzer of special teams. I mean, I think EB is really getting the full, he is earning every bit of that associate head coach title. And if I can go off topic on here, just on like kind of on the last point, I was thinking about this as we were talking. One of the things that I'm interested to see in terms of EB's offense, and it's particularly kind of juxtaposed with the Eagles' success with quarterback sneaks, right? And obviously they have a quarterback that can execute it really well, and an offensive line that can execute it really well. But like EB, I don't believe called a quarterback sneak for Patrick Mahomes because he got injured in 2018. I want to say against Denver, and like from 2018 to last year, like they may have had 1 or 0 with Patrick Mahomes. And I wonder if because the Eagles have demonstrated like how successful that play can be, is that something EB brings back, or is he now in a philosophical position where it's like it's not worth the injury risk to our quarterback? I know that is completely off topic, but it's something that I thought you might appreciate specifically. That my brain just went there for some reason.
No, that is fascinating because those are the kinds of things, and it's off topic, but it's not that hard to tie together either because that's like an organizational decision, right? It's a play call that happens during a game, but it's either on or off your play sheet because you make that determination as an organization, and that's something that between your head coach and your offensive coordinator, you might say, we are not exposing our quarterback to this. We are willing to risk this. We're not willing to risk that. And, the thing to kind of, I guess, give a shot at answering my own question, Sam, and curious to get your thoughts on it real quick before we let you go, although I'm sure you'd love to just stay on the phone with us for however long you're in the car on your taxi ride back from Baltimore, is like when you're a good delegator and you're a good CEO type, your impact is very actually hard to see. It's a lot easier to see when it's bad because you guide people the wrong direction and you're like, why did you do that? Like, why did you allow that to happen? But if you're just kind of quietly keeping everybody inside the lines and a tap here, a nudge here, you've set up a good infrastructure that a lot of things run themselves, which after 4 years, or going into year 4, I should say, with Rivera, you'd hope he'd have done. Like, it can be, I don't want to call it hands-off job, but is a lot of just kind of watching the things you've set up work. And if that's where Ron's at this point, and he's actually got the right people in place to do the jobs, like, that's fine. But it is the kind of thing where you kind of sit back if you want to be cynical about it and go, hey, man, what do you do besides press conferences? Because that's really, I think, obviously his biggest impact in a way is that like he's the public voice of the team. But it's because he set a lot of stuff up with purpose over the past couple of years.
Yeah, I think everybody's had, the middle manager, like your direct boss, like, people have to work with that good or bad, but like the boss above them, I think everybody's had experiences in a corporate workplace, in a newsroom, in a football organization where there's good ones and bad ones. And I think that the good ones, the good boss above your direct boss, like if they keep everybody in the lines, like you said, and promote communication, like not to sound like all corporate synergy or whatever, like to use the buzzwords, but like
your bosses are so happy.
I do think that's really real, right? Because last year the offense did not communicate well, and it was not just like Scott Turner. I think that there was communication challenges at times between at the position coach level. And so if Ron Rivera's whole thing is, okay, EB's going to run this offense, but I'm going to make sure if I'm sitting in on the running backs meeting and then I see something in the tight ends meeting that I think would mesh, obviously you want those guys to talk, but just bringing the experience that Ron has and being like, hey, maybe I suggest this stuff. I think that is probably his most optimal usage. I would be totally open to Ron's thoughts on that because he knows, like, I think how to do his job best. But, like, those are the things that I can see where it's hard to see that or quantify that in a press conference. But, like, those things, just keeping everybody in the line, keeping everybody out on the same page and innovating, hopefully, which is the goal, that would be valuable to me.
Yeah, absolutely. No doubt. I appreciate that answer a lot. All right. Have fun in your taxi ride back, and we'll talk to you soon.
I will say that I got home maybe like 5 or 10 minutes ago, but I just threw the mic on mute and like paid for it and got out. So I'm glad that you couldn't tell and it did not interrupt the interview at all.
Wow. I'm impressed, Sam Fortier. I am impressed. Excellent work, sir. All right. Well, enjoy your home.
All right. I appreciate it, man. It's good to talk to y'all always.
Always. Sam Fortier, everybody, Washington Post, Commanders beat reporter. Read his work at WashingtonPost.com/sports.
This is the Hoffman Show on the T980 and the Odyssey app.